Bonjour, bienvenue sur le plateau d'Informatique News pour notre rendez-vous, le Grand Témoin. Aujourd'hui, nous avons le plaisir de recevoir Amit Yoran, qui est CEO de la société Tenable, qui est spécialisée en cybersécurité. Amit Yoran, good morning. You are based in Washington, D.C., so it's still the morning for you.
Thank you. It's great to join you.
Yeah, thank you for accepting our invitation. Let's start to make a quick presentation of your company for readers who don't know your Tenable. You are a company founded in 2002, specialized in cybersecurity, as I said, and you're going to be, if the trend continues, what it was in the last 2 or 3 years, you're going to be a $1 billion company in 2024. So it's, it gives you a size of the company. And Tenable was founded on the simple idea that before installing any kind of tools and solution for cybersecurity, you have to know the state of your system, of your application. That's what you call exposure. Could you, and you're still doing that, and in that sense, you are not competing directly with other vendors, but you are more complementing what they have to offer. Could you elaborate a little bit about that?
Sure. Tenable is we're a global company. We help maybe about 45,000 customers around the world, including many large corporations, about 40% of the global 2,000 and 60% of the Fortune 500. And our primary focus is in helping people audit or assess their level of cyber risk. So we don't, as you said, like many security companies, which may provide authentication or may provide encryption or may help detect attacks and respond to attacks, Tenable's mission and focus is very simple. We audit your systems and we tell you where you have security problems and how you can most efficiently manage and reduce that risk.
Mm-hmm. Which is the way companies should start with dealing with cybersecurity, and in most cases they don't do it. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, well, certainly, we think being proactive about your cybersecurity is much more cost-effective. If you look at recent breaches over the last several years, a vast majority of them are caused by people which just don't apply the patches or they misconfigure their systems. So it's not some very sexy nation-state intelligence service attack. It's just people being sloppy in how they manage their systems, which leaves them vulnerable. And so we help them identify where these problems are and how to fix them. Many of the cases we can, the fixes are actually free.
And you can use, companies can use your system both ways, in a way that it's like an island, just using your platform, or they can using it connecting with other solution vendors. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we obviously are capable of providing the audit and assessment, but that data that we expose about what systems you have and how they're configured and where there are problems is really interesting data. And so we integrate with many different cybersecurity and IT infrastructure technologies, a lot of logging systems, a lot of attack detection systems, a lot of patch management and configuration management systems. So we have about 150 different companies and different technologies which we integrate with natively in order to help people leverage this data in different ways.
There is a big problem for companies relating to cybersecurity. There is a company, an institution in France called cesse, and they are doing surveys, every year. And I think the last one in 2022, they was saying that in average, a company, let's say a mid-sized company, is using like 15 different products in cybersecurity, and this is very difficult to manage. So using your solution can solve two problems. The one you just exposed, which is the exposure management, but also using it as a platform to integrate all the product. Is this the way it is?
Yeah, I think there are sort of this trend to help organizations use products that are more tightly integrated, because it's too costly to work with so many vendors, and not all of the products work very well together. So in our case, we can help assess vulnerabilities and problems, misconfigurations, not only in traditional IT, but also looking at cloud-based environments, looking at Active Directory and your identity stores, looking at operational technologies, which are the control systems, the computer-machine interaction points, which may be used in manufacturing, in robotics, in oil and gas and energy industries. So we're really helping people consolidate the technologies they use and integrate the data, the insights that we find with the other platforms that they're using.
Mm-hmm. And there is another problem, which is the surface of attacks that can be used by hackers is growing all the time, and even though exploding, they're going cloud, multi-cloud, IoT, all kind of edge computing, and this is of course a good deal for all the hackers who can try to find a place to go everywhere. What can company can do about that?
So one of the things that we've learned is that companies like to look at specific problems and try and find solutions and deal with these specific problems, like you mentioned, cloud. And so they'll look for a cloud security vendor, a cloud security opportunity. The challenge is you may look at your cloud environment and may look like it's secure, but you may have developers connecting to that cloud environment which have a very high degree of permissions, and they may be coming from systems which have all sorts of problems on there. So that means that you may have a problem with your cloud environment even though your cloud is connected. So we encourage our customers to look at their attack surface more holistically, not to look at individual problems, but to think of their environment the way a hacker would. How can I use the combinations of problems that I find to identify an attack path into the more sensitive information, what I'm really looking for?
In this regards, do you think that containers are a big problem for companies because it gives hackers so many ways to attack the company and the systems?
I think, as with any piece of technology, containers are going to be used. If they'll make the organization more efficient, if they'll help reduce costs, if they'll help organizations develop faster and deliver more functions to the customers at better speed, at lower cost, they're going to be used. And so the question isn't, whether we should be using containers. The question is, how can we evaluate these technologies and use them in a risk-managed, in a risk-mitigated way? And so I think being able to evaluate containers as part of an overall cloud strategy and an overall cybersecurity risk management practice can be done, and can be done effectively.
But the problem with containers is they are, when we were with virtual machine, you had like 100 virtual machines, and you were able to manage all this. But when you deal with container, you're talking about thousands and even more than that, and they are, their life cycle is so short that the stable is not stable anymore. It's moving all the time. So this gives an ability to the hackers to attack more easily, don't you think?
I do think that containers open up new paths of access that hackers might not have had before. So for sure, containers can weaken your security program. But containers can also be done with very limited functionality. They don't have all of the software that a general purpose operating system and a virtual machine or a traditional server might have. And so to some extent, you can use containers, if you use them strategically, to minimize the attack surface. And when they are compromised, if they are compromised, they can be wiped out very quickly, and they don't provide a persistent access the way a traditional virtual machine might be. So I think the real key to operating containers securely is understanding how the parts of your cloud environment, how the modern use of cloud in totality looks, and how the containers you're standing up fit into that overall security program to make sure you're doing it in a smart way.
Okay. Let's talk about specifically your solution. Last October, you made the announcement of Tenable One, which is an exposure platform. What was new with Tenable One compared to what you had before?
So Tenable is, as you said earlier, we're sort of approaching $1 billion in sales and scale, and we've got tens of thousands of customers around the world. And we've evolved from just traditional vulnerability management to helping people assess their modern attack surface. So looking more specifically at containers and cloud environments and identities, which are so critical to security, which are targeted very frequently, almost target number one by ransomware and intelligence services, looking at operational technologies. And so over the last 3 to 4 years, we've really expanded our offering. With Tenable One, for the first time, we're bringing the data from these different silos, from these different audit functions together so that you can start connecting dots on what the overall security posture looks like, and you can start evaluating and assessing attack paths from the outside of your organization, from the internet, to the really sensitive assets.
If a company used your solution before, how do they implement Tenable One? Are they to replace it, or can they expand it to in a way that they're going to use Tenable One as their own solution?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we're doing is we're trying to make it much easier to adopt a broader understanding of your attack surface. So if you're using Tenable for vulnerability management, for instance, simply by adding new asset types, like assessing your Active Directory, your directory services, or your containers in your cloud environment, you start getting the benefit and the leverage from Tenable One. So we think it helps organizations reduce cost, assess, and have a much more holistic view of their attack surface, and enables them to find much more interesting security issues that they should know about.
How long does it take to install Tenable One? And do you propose managed services to company, or are they on their own? They're just using your solution and they're doing what they have to do?
The answer is different organizations deploy Tenable One at different paces. Some organizations take their time. They're very thoughtful and methodical in how they do it. One global pharmaceutical company, one of the largest in the world, deployed Tenable in 2.5 weeks on a global basis to millions of systems. So it all depends on the pace. It all depends on how focused the organization is.
So it could be done very quickly, because 2.5 weeks is very quick for a large company, and which means it's easier to sell because the return of an investment is very quick.
We try and make it, ease the burden of adoption, and we try and make a time to value. So customers, once they start deploying, they start seeing really interesting things that can be compelling, things that can help them understand what a hacker might take advantage of very quickly.
Is there a way to measure the efficiency of your solution for a company? I mean, do you give them an index or something that to prove that before and after they are a lot more resilient against the threats?
One of the greatest challenges in the cybersecurity industry is the lack of consistent metrics, the lack of a real insight into how secure or how exposed or how vulnerable you are. And so at Tenable, we're focused on answering this question through a number of different measurements. One is, how much of your environment are you assessing? How thoroughly you're assessing it? How aggressively and how detailed is your assessment of the environment? And then once you identify issues, how quickly are you remediating the problems? How quickly are you fixing the problems and reducing risk? And we think the combinations of all of these data points helps determine the level of cyber risk, the level of cyber proficiency for an organization. And so we're able to look at and identify the cyber hygiene, the cyber exposure scores, and then offer organizations a comparison. How do you look from a cybersecurity practices perspective relative to other organizations in the same industry or in the same region of the world? And so we think these types of data points is very interesting for organizational leadership that might not be cybersecurity experts.
Mm-hmm. And also all these metrics are very interesting for a cyber insurance company, which you're working with them also, right?
We are working with cyber insurance companies, and I think this is an industry which has been evolving a lot over the last few years, because historically there hasn't been a tremendous amount of data for cyber insurers to work with, and so they've been writing policies, and in many cases their clients have been hit with ransomware, and they've had to pay out significant payments, and so some insurers are no longer underwriting cyber policies. Other cyber policies and cyber insurance, the prices are skyrocketing for organizations. And so I think this type of insight, what does your cyber hygiene look like? How aggressive are your cybersecurity practices? And how good is your cybersecurity management? I think these types of data points are instrumental for helping insurers make better insurance decisions and helping companies reduce the cost of insurance by being able to prove that they're exercising good judgment.
But is it not difficult to work for both sides? Because, they are both sides. I mean, the companies on one side and the cyber insurance company on the other side, they are not friends all the time. So how can you deal with these two sides at the same time?
The great news for Tenable is that we're extremely unbiased. The data is the data.
Okay.
And so what we're enabling is organizations, whether they're insurers or companies looking for insurance, to understand their cyber hygiene, to understand their cyber practice. What they may choose to disclose to their insurer or not is entirely up to them. It's their data. But we're helping them really understand what they have in their environment and how secure it is or isn't.
So what you're saying, in a way, it's better to have facts than to have nothing, that you can, show nothing to these companies.
Well, historically, the cyber world hasn't had facts and data, and so I think we're trying to enable a new era in cybersecurity that is based on data, that is fact-oriented, and I think it's a significant step forward for many organizations.
Okay, let's talk in general about the threats. We could put them in two parts. One is all the, let's say, illegal activities like DDoS, like ransomware, like phishing, like all that kind of thing, attacking directly. And then you have the other side, which is more legal. It depends of what kind of regulation do you have, but we're talking about social media and that kind of company, and you used an expression which I like very much. You said these companies are data vacuum cleaners, and they're sucking all the data, and then after that they're doing all what they want about it. And then on that side also you have all the solutions that you can work with to make some fake news and that kind of stuff. What do you think are these? We have to deal with both, of course, but do you think the second world is growing more rapidly and it's going to pose a bigger threat in the near future?
I think if you look at the modern social media and to a large extent modern media companies, a lot of their business model is driven by engaging with their consumers, with their users. And a lot of that engagement means really creating a strong emotion. And so the content in a lot of media today, and a lot of social media in particular, is very focused on creating this strong emotion, this strong engagement, which in many cases results in the engagement they're looking for. And so that means they're looking for shocking content or content which people really want to see. And it becomes really susceptible to exaggeration, susceptible to fake news, susceptible to all of the things which are causing division in society today. And I think it's a significant problem.
Not even a year ago, we had an interview with your CTO, Renaud de Raison, and it's a year ago. It doesn't seem a long time, but I mean, since we are talking every week about generative AI and the ChatGPT and the same kind of a solution. What do you think what will be the impact of this in the near future, and then in the maybe 3 or 4 years, if it's possible to give an idea about what is going to happen. So what will be the impact of all this in general and in the cybersecurity world in particular?
Yeah, so at Tenable, we use and have been using different types of AI for a number of years. There are tens of thousands of vulnerabilities that are discovered every year. And so the question is, which ones of these vulnerabilities are more important? Which ones are exploitable? Which ones are more benign? The question is, about how critical are the vulnerabilities? Questions about how critical are the assets that we're assessing relative to other assets, so that you can determine, if I can fix one vulnerability or protect one asset, how should I prioritize my work when I'm defending a network? And so we've been using AIs in cybersecurity and at Tenable for years now, and doing it very effectively. With the introduction of large language models and some of the generative AI technologies that are available today, I think that there's really 3 primary things we can expect. The first is a radical acceleration of the threat environment. You were talking earlier about social media and all of the data that's available and collected on us. As we're used to phishing and we're used to email scams and other methods, there are more focused efforts called spear phishing, which is really tailored, custom, and engineered to you and well-researched. With things like generative AI, cyber criminals and nation states can take very large data sets, tremendous amounts of information available to them through social media and other means, and really craft detailed campaigns against you across not just you as an individual, but across tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people. So it's very scary. When you look at all of the vulnerabilities out there and how few of them, maybe about 15%, end up being weaponized, having exploit code written for them. You can imagine taking a generative AI and saying, hey, write exploit code for all of the vulnerabilities which I know about. And so I think there can be a radical acceleration of the threat environment, whether it's through social media or whether it's through vulnerabilities and network-based attacks and combinations of the two. So I think the first thing about generative AI is we can see that the internet's going to become, and technology are going to become, a lot scarier and a lot riskier to use. The second is how we can use some of these generative AIs to better protect ourselves. The same way adversaries can look at it and say which vulnerabilities are exploited and write exploit code for it. We can also start detecting attacks more efficiently. We can start understanding our environment and how combinations of problems can result in real issues that need to be prioritized and addressed. And perhaps even eventually changing network architectures and changing software configurations in an automatic fashion. That's not going to happen very quickly, but it's going to happen over time. And so I think the first advantage, the speed of using some of these AIs, will go to the threat. Over time, it can be used effectively by network defenders.
So I understood that very well, but it means that for the months to come, maybe 1 year, 2 years, all companies and all government and institutions will have very careful about cybersecurity, right? Is that the idea?
I think the cybersecurity threats are going to multiply and accelerate very quickly over the next few years.
Okay, we talk a little bit about regulation, and it looks like in that field, Europe is kind of leading the way, because we had GDPR like 5 years ago, which is a long time ago in our industry. We had the Digital Services Act. We have a Digital Marketing Act. They are working on the AI Act, which they probably will have to work a little bit more, because this was before the generative AI. So in a way that Europe is leading the way, and then the American company, it looks like they didn't take that very seriously, because if you look at the fine, Facebook was sentenced like weeks ago, 1.2 billion euros. And if you take the top 10 companies fined because they didn't follow the GDPR regulation, it goes to $3.5 billion, and it's just 3 companies. It's Amazon, Google, and Facebook. What do you think? So Americans are leading the way in terms of developing technology, but Europe is leading the way in terms of regulating the technology. Do you think the example of Europe will be addressed by American institutions and government pretty soon? Because it doesn't look that they don't want to do very much right now.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think culturally, there's obviously many differences within Europe, but also between European cultures and in the U.S. And I think a lot of the U.S. regulation with respect to privacy and security has been very focused on controlling government expansion and use of power, whereas in Europe, a lot of it has been very focused on less controlling of government, but more controlling of private corporations, invading our privacy and using this information. So I think to that extent, Europe is further ahead than the US in creating unified privacy and security regulation like GDPR. I think in the US, there are some interesting things which are occurring now, specifically with the Securities and Exchange Commission having some new rulings saying all public companies have to report breaches within 72 hours. They also have to report their cybersecurity risk management practices. And so I think increased transparency, whether it's through regulation in Europe or regulation in the US, I think this increased transparency will help improve cybersecurity across the board.
But do you think this is going fast enough?
Well, obviously, we have to be very careful to not create unintended consequences as we regulate. But no, I think any regulation which drives transparency, almost without exception, is going to improve cybersecurity. And the more we do and the faster we do it, the better off we are.
Okay. One question about Tenable, again, specifically Tenable. You made some acquisition recently. Were these acquisitions just opportunistic, or is this part of your new strategy to make acquisition to go faster in that market, which is evolving very fast?
It's a great question. So Tenable, we went public just over 5 years ago, about 5 years ago. And until then, the company went from startup over the course of 15 years to IPO, really without doing a whole lot of acquisitions, really focused on building technology in the vulnerability assessment space. Over the last 4 years, we've made 5 acquisitions, which have been focused on helping us assess other aspects of people's attack surface. So we in fact, acquired companies in Israel and Tel Aviv and Paris and France and in the US as well, to help organizations assess this broader attack surface. And I think that that will continue. In today's macro environment, it's a very difficult economy. Companies, startups with really interesting technology find it difficult to get sales. They find it difficult to get more venture funding and growth financing. And so in this market, we think that there's an opportunity for Tenable to continue to expand inorganically, and we'll look for those opportunities.
So this acquisition will be more focused on technology than on market, right?
For us, we're a technology company. If we can find technology that's mature, that's additive to our strategy and direction, that's really what we're looking for. And we have very broad market reach already. We're one of the most broadly adopted cybersecurity technologies out there, with 45,000 customers around the world in just about every industry and geo. So if we find good technology, we can really help integrate it and bring it to market.
Okay. To finish this interview, I have a more personal question. You've been working for the public sector and the private sector. So I have two questions. One is what difference there is regarding the cybersecurity world, and so that's one question. And what is the difference in terms of approach between these two sectors?
Yeah, I would say the primary or the greatest difference is in focus, efficiency, and speed. In the private sector, we can make decisions very quickly. They're within our vision, mission, and our charter of what we're trying to accomplish as an organization. All we have to do is evaluate the options, determine the right one for us and for our customers, and execute on it. I think in the public sector and the government, there's much more sensitivity around what government can do, what is overreaching, what is the role of government versus the private sector. And those are very important conversations for our government partners to have. And we work very closely with many governments around the world. I will say that despite the differences in speed and pace and to some extent scale of what government can do different than the private sector, I think there's more that unites us. I think there's a common mission in government to help protect organizations from modern cybersecurity threats that is also very aligned with what our company and many companies around the world are trying to do, which is help protect tens of thousands of organizations from these rapidly evolving threats.
But the problem is all these administration, they can move pretty fast, but they have to deal with the political world. And when you see the Senate, for example, it looks like most of these people, they've been born before the internet, so they probably don't be aware about what's going on. So don't you think that's an issue? And it's the same thing in France and in other countries.
Well, for sure, when you look at elected officials and what generation they're coming from, we need more understanding. I think now, for the first time, there's general awareness of cybersecurity issues and problems, even if there isn't specific detailed knowledge of technology in cybersecurity. But as you know, whether it's in France or in the US, most of the legislators, most of the government officials aren't deriving the policy decisions on their own. They're using staff, they're using other members, which frequently are younger, and supporting them and helping them understand the technology and helping them propose solutions and policy choices which aligned with the worldview and the view of the population which has elected them. So it is, I think as had been said by Churchill, it's imperfect except for every other form of government.
Okay, well, I think we've covered a pretty much size of the subject. Anyways, Amit Yoran, thank you very much.
Great joining you. Thank you for inviting me.